Salvatore Vitale was born on September 22, 1947, in Mobster, Queens in New York City. He was the son of Giuseppe and Lily Vitale, who had emigrated from the village of San Giuseppe Jato in Sicily after World War II. The couple had already had 3 daughters, but Salvatore was their only son to survive childbirth. Salvatore was described by his family as emotionally distant as a child. Sal first met Joseph Massino, future boss of the Bonanno family, as a child. Massino had begun dating Vitale's sister Josephine in 1956, and the couple married in 1960. Massino also befriended Sal, becoming a surrogate big brother to his future brother-in-law. Unlike Massino, Vitale graduated from Grover Cleveland High School in Ridgewood, Queens. He also attempted to have a legitimate career. He entered the United States military and had been trained as a paratrooper. Discharged in 1968, he went on to work briefly as a New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision corrections officer, working in Queens with drug offenders. He and his wife Diana moved to Long Island, a safe distance from mob-entrenched Mobster, to have a better life for themselves. Salvatore managed his own social club in Mobster, not far from Joseph Massino's Casablanca restaurant and catering service, where he would meet with his underlings. His son Anthony would later work for mob associate Robert Perino at the New York Post after he dropped out of college. When he quit that job, Sal approached Joseph Massino for criminal work within the crime family and soon became involved in burglaries and transport truck hijacking. He was given a no-show job as a food consultant for King Caterers. Joe Massino began jockeying for power with Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano, another loyalist captain to the boss Philip Rastelli. Both men were themselves threatened by another faction seeking to depose the absentee boss, led by captains Alphonse "Sonny Red" Indelicato, Dominic "Big Trin" Trincera, and Philip Giacconi. The commission initially tried to maintain neutrality, but in 1981, Massino got word from Carmine "Tutti" Franzese, Sonny Franzese's cousin, that the 3 captains were stocking up on automatic weapons and planning to kill the Rastelli loyalists within the Bonanno family to take complete control. Massino turned to Colombo crime family boss Carmine Persico and Gambino boss Paul Castellano for advice. They told him to act immediately. Massino, Napolitano, and Gerlando Sciascia, a Sicilian-born capo linked to the Montreal Rizzuto crime family, arranged a meeting at a Brooklyn social club with the 3 capos for May 5, 1981. They had 4 gunmen, including Vitale and Bonanno-affiliated Montreal boss Vito Rizzuto, hiding in a closet to ambush them. When Trincera, Giaccone, and Indelicato arrived with Frank Lino to meet Massino, they were shot to death, with Massino himself stopping Indelicato from escaping. Lino escaped unscathed by running out the door. The hit further improved Massino's prestige, but was marred by both Lino's escape and the discovery of Indelicato's body on May 28th. On April 21, 1983, Rastelli was paroled, and he and Massino ordered the murder of Bonanno soldier Cesare Bonventri. Massino summoned Vitale, Louis Attanasio, and James Tartaglione to his hideout and gave them the order. By this time, even though Rastelli was still officially head of the family, Joe Massino was considered by most mobsters to be the family's street boss and field commander in all but name, as well as Rastelli's heir apparent. According to Sal Vitale, Massino had Bonventre killed for giving him no support when he was in hiding. In April 1984, Bonventre was called to a meeting with Rastelli in Queens. He was picked up by Vitale and Attanasio and driven to a garage. En route, Attanasio shot Bonventre twice in the head but only wounded him. He would kill Bonventre with 2 more shots when they reached their destination. The task of disposing of Bonventre's corpse was handed to Gabriel Infanti, who promised Vitale that Bonventre's remains would disappear forever. However, after a tip to law enforcement, the remains were discovered on April 16, 1984, in a warehouse in Garfield, New Jersey, stuffed into 2 55-gallon glue drums. For his part in the hit, Massino had Vitale initiated into the Bonanno family. Later in 1984, both secured no-show jobs with the Long Island-based King Caterers in exchange for protecting them from Lucchese extortion. In 1985, an indictment charged Vitale as a co-conspirator in the hijacking cases alongside Massino. On October 15, 1986, Massino was found guilty of racketeering charges for accepting kickbacks on the Bonannos' behalf. He was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, his first prison term. Rostelli, also convicted and in poor health during the trial, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Around this time, Massino was believed to be the Bonanno family's official underboss. With Rostelli in declining health, Massino was also reckoned as the operating head of the family, though consigliere Anthony "Old Man" Sparrow was nominally acting boss. In April 1987, Joe and Sal went on trial for truck hijacking and conspiracy to commit the triple murder, defended by Samuel H. Dawson and Bruce Cutler, respectively. On June 3rd, while both men were convicted on hijacking charges, they were cleared of the murder conspiracy charges. Further, the only proven criminal acts took place outside the RICO Act's 5-year statute of limitations. Without evidence that the criminal enterprise was still active in this time frame, the jury returned a special verdict clearing Massino and Vitale of these charges as well. On Massino's orders, Sal organized the murder of Gabriel Infanti, who had also botched a 1982 hit on Anthony Gilberti and was suspected of being an informant. During his meetings with Joe Massino in prison, Vitale, on behalf of the Bonannos' capos, urged his brother-in-law to become boss in name as well as in fact. Rostelli had spent all but 2 years of his reign behind bars, and many felt Massino would bring the family stability. He was reluctant to take over as long as Rostelli was alive. Not only was he respectful of Rostelli's sponsorship of his mafia career, but mafia tradition dictates that a boss keeps his title for life unless he abdicates. However, in the spring of 1991, Joe Massino told Sal Vitale, "If Rostelli dies, make me boss." Rostelli died on June 24, 1991. A few days after his funeral, in accordance with Massino's orders, Vitale called a meeting of the family's captains, and Joe Massino was acclaimed as boss. Massino was granted 2 years supervised release on November 13, 1992. During that time, he could not associate with convicted mafiosi. To get around this restriction, he named Vitale underboss and designated him as his messenger for the duration of his supervised release. While the FBI suspected Sal Vitale was a mafioso, he had never been convicted of a mafia-related crime. The FBI would thus have no reason to be suspicious of him associating with Massino, since they were brothers-in-law. He returned to his job at King Caterers, and in 1996 became co-owner of Casablanca, a well-reviewed Macbeth Italian restaurant. To minimize the damage from informants or undercover investigations, Massino decentralized the family's organization. He created a clandestine cell system for his crews, forbidding them from contacting one another and avoiding meeting their captains. A side effect of these reforms was the reduction of Vitale, in his own words, to a figurehead. By the time of Massino's release, the Bonanno family had grown tired of Vitale, regarding him as greedy and overstepping his authority. In the new structure of the family, Vitale lost the underboss's usual role as a go-between for the boss, as well as the share of the family's profits those duties entailed, and Massino made it clear to Vitale his unpopularity was a factor in these changes. Vitale remained loyal, however, and helped Massino organize the March 18, 1999 murder of Gerlando Sciascia. Massino indicated to fellow mobsters that Sciascia was killed for feuding with fellow Massino confidant Captain Anthony Graziano, accusing him of using cocaine, while in his own testimony, Joe claimed Sciascia was killed for killing another mobster's son. Sciascia's body was not covertly buried, but instead left to be discovered in a street in the Bronx, an attempt to make the hit look like a botched drug deal rather than a mafia-ordered hit. And Massino had his captains attend Sciascia's funeral. Salvatore Vitale was put under house arrest in 2001 after pleading guilty to his role in an extortion scheme on Long Island. He later also pleaded guilty to loan sharking charges in June 2002. Sal was not immediately sentenced and was placed under house arrest in the interim. However, the maximum sentence he faced was so low that Messino wrongly suspected his underboss was cooperating with law enforcement. He secretly ordered that, if he was arrested, Vitale was to be taken down, demoted, or killed. Until 2002, the Bonanos had been the only family in the modern history of the New York Mafia since the Castellamarese War to have never had a made man turn informant or government witness. Messino used this as a point of pride to rally his crime family. That year, Frank Cappa, convicted on fraud and facing further charges from an FBI forensic accounting investigation, became the first to flip. Cappa gave information that directly implicated both Vitale and acting underboss Richard Cantarella in the Perino murder. Cantarella himself flipped soon afterward. On January 9, 2003, Messino was arrested and indicted alongside Vitale, Frank Lino, and Capo Daniel Mongeli in a comprehensive racketeering indictment. On the day of Vitale's arrest, FBI agents dropped a bombshell. They had evidence that Messino believed Vitale had turned informer and had gone as far as to put a contract on him. It turned out that Cappa and Cantarella had told the FBI of Messino's earlier plans to kill his brother-in-law. While in custody, Messino again put out the word that he was very upset with Vitale and wanted to give him a receipt, his term for a whacking. Other Bonanno defendants awaiting trial began calling Vitale Fredo, after Fredo Corleone, Michael Corleone's turncoat brother in The Godfather Part 2. The FBI took the threat very seriously, going as far as to house Messino and Vitale in separate prisons, Messino in Brooklyn, Vitale in Manhattan, and keep them apart when they were not appearing in court. Vitale was already dissatisfied by the lack of support he and his family received from Messino after his arrest. Despite this, he had every intention of staying loyal until learning that Messino wanted him killed. On the day he was arraigned with Messino, Vitale decided to flip as soon as it was safe to do so. He formally reached a deal with prosecutors in February. Shortly after Vitale reached his deal, Lino flipped as well. Lino knew that Vitale could implicate him in at least 4 murders, including that of Sonny Black. Also flipping was longtime Bonanno associate Duane Leisenheimer, whom Vitale implicated in several crimes, including 2 murders. When an investigator for Messino's defense team started probing to see if Leisenheimer would flip, Leisenheimer feared that Messino would put a contract on him and cut a deal with prosecutors for his own safety. While the prosecution relied heavily on the testimony of 5 other turncoats, Vitale was of particular significance to the prosecution's case. Not only was he the 3rd confessed underboss of a New York crime family to turn informer after the Gambinos Sammy the Bull and the Lucchese's Anthony Casso, but he had spent most of his 3 decades in the mafia as a close confidant to Messino. This closeness allowed prosecutors to introduce evidence of over 3 decades of criminal activity by Messino and enabled Vitale to cover his brother-in-law's entire criminal history in his testimony. The only witness called by Messino's defense was an FBI agent to challenge Vitale's reliability. On the strength of testimony from Vitale and other turncoats, Messino was convicted on all 11 RICO counts on July 30, 2004. Facing the prospect of the death penalty for ordering Sciascia's murder, Messino almost immediately began talks for a plea deal of his own. He formally pleaded guilty to that charge on June 23, 2005, and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. Vitale had admitted to 11 murders, but for his cooperation was sentenced to time served on October 29, 2010, and entered the Witness Protection Program. Vitale's testimony led to the convictions of 51 organized crime figures. He returned to the stand again in March of 2012 to testify against Thomas Gioli. In the mid-1980s, Tommy Gioli was imprisoned for robbery, his first incarceration. After his release, he became a made member, or full member, of the Colombo family. He started working for Captain Vittorio Vic Orena in the late 1980s, leader of the Colombo Brooklyn faction and one of the family's top earners. He has a wife, Maureen, and owns a home in Farmingdale, New York. John Marzulli of New York Daily News discovered that he had a press pass from Long Island's Nightlife magazine that had been issued to him in the 1980s and expired in 1987. Nightlife magazine editor Michael Cutino explained Gioli's press credentials as the magazine was doing a nightclub promotion in the Hamptons, and Gioli worked for a company that provided attractive cigarette girls for the event. In 1982, Tommy allegedly participated in the accidental killing of Veronica Zuraw, a former Catholic nun. Zuraw was killed by a stray bullet during the assassination of Colombo mobster Joseph Perino. Government witness Dino Calabro claimed that Gioli told him he was going to hell for killing a nun. However, he maintains his innocence, and no charges in the Zuraw killing have been filed against him. In 1997, Tommy allegedly participated in the murder of Ralph Dole's NYPD officer. Colombo consigliere Joel Cacace had ordered Dole's death because Doles had recently married Cacace's ex-wife, Kim Kenna. Tommy allegedly took the order from Cacace and arranged for Calabro and Colombo mobster Dino Saracino to shoot Doles outside his Brooklyn house. In 1989, the imprisoned Colombo boss Carmine Persico appointed Orena to be his temporary acting boss. By 1991, Orena, with the encouragement of Gambino crime family boss John Gotti, felt strong enough to challenge Persico for total control of the family. In response, Persico tried to assassinate Orena in 1991. This attack triggered a bloody internal conflict in the Colombo family between the Persico and Orena factions. Tommy gave his support to Orena. Bloody shootouts between the two factions in 1991 resulted in murders of prominent Orena supporters. As the war progressed, many Orena loyalists switched sides to the Persico faction to avoid being killed. In 1991, Tommy switched sides and became the top lieutenant and protege of hitman Gregory Scarpa Sr. On June 12, 1991, Gioli, Calabro, and soldier Joseph Compatiello allegedly murdered Frank Marassa, an Orena loyalist, outside Marassa's home in Brooklyn. Gioli allegedly murdered Marassa because he was falsely accused of being involved in the murder of another Colombo associate. On March 25, 1992, Gioli and Calabro allegedly murdered John Minerva and Michael Imbergamo as they sat in a parked car on Long Island. Minerva was murdered because he was a Colombo soldier with the Orena faction. Imbergamo was a friend of Minerva's who was not involved in organized crime. On March 27, 1992, Gioli and several Persico loyalists were ambushed and became involved in a high-speed car chase. Tommy was wounded in the shoulder and stomach, earning him the nickname Tommy Shots and a reputation for toughness. In 1992, Orena was arrested and indicted on racketeering and murder charges. In 1993, one of Orena's last remaining allies, Joseph Scopo, was killed, and Victor Orena was sentenced to life in prison. The Persico faction now claimed victory, and Persico's son, Alphonse, Little Alley Boy Persico, took effective control of the family. In the late 1990s, Persico and John de Ross promoted Gioli to capo regime. On August 3, 1995, him and other mobsters allegedly murdered Colombo associate Richard Greaves in Saraceno's basement apartment. Greaves had asked the Colombo leadership for permission to leave the family and move to the Midwest. However, the leaders feared that Greaves might become a government witness and ordered his killing. Tommy allegedly buried Greaves' body in an industrial park in Farmingdale, New York. In May of '99, Tommy Gioli, Dino Calabro, and Dino Saracino allegedly murdered William Wild Bill Ctolo, the new Colombo underboss, in Saraceno's apartment. Alphonse Persico had been recently convicted of a gun possession charge in Florida. He feared that Ctolo, a former Orena lieutenant, would seize control of the Colombo family. Persico ordered Cutolo to meet him in a park in Brooklyn. Gioli, Calabro, and Saracino took Cutolo to Saracino's house, where they allegedly murdered him. Gioli then allegedly buried Cutolo in the same location in Farmingdale, where he allegedly buried Greaves 4 years earlier. After the 2004 conviction of acting boss Joel Kakas, Gioli was promoted to street boss, with his protege Paul Bavacqua as acting captain. Gioli's position included meeting with Carmine Persico and conveying messages to family leaders such as Vincent and Benny Alloy, John Franzese, and John DeRoss. Gioli was indicted for robbery, extortion, the 1991 Marassa murder, and the 1992 Minerva and Imbergamo murders. The robbery indictment involved a 1991 fur shop robbery in which Gioli allegedly posed as a customer. On December 16, 2008, Gioli was indicted on the 1995 Greaves murder and the 1999 Cutolo murder. Although Alphonse Persico was convicted in 2007 of ordering Cutolo's murder, prosecutors had lacked sufficient evidence then to indict Gioli. However, by 2008, both Calabro and Compatiello were now government witnesses planning to testify against him. Gioli was briefly hospitalized after suffering a minor stroke. Already diagnosed with diabetes and cardiac problems, he had unsuccessfully petitioned the court to be released from jail due to his medical problems. He has also complained to the court about his dental problems, the poor quality of the jail food, and allegedly unsanitary practices in the dispensation of his medicine. In July 2010, he was indicted in the 1997 Dolls murder. 2 years later, the jury returned a mixed verdict. Tommy was cleared of the Cutolo and Dolls murders, but convicted of racketeering conspiracy to commit murder in the Minerva and Marassa cases. And on March 19, 2014, he was sentenced to 18 years and 8 months in prison and ordered to pay $360,000 in restitution. In September of 2015, he was incarcerated in the low-security wing of the Federal Correctional Complex, Butner, in Butner, North Carolina, until he was released on May 3, 2023.